what makes him really unique is that I believe we could consider him the greatest teacher in Israel, one of the greatest teachers in Israel. And I'll tell you why. And I never thought of Rashi in this way until I actually was preparing this. Came to me actually today when I was putting the presentation. I mean, I've been preparing for a couple of days now, but when I was putting the presentation together today, it came to me. What are the attributes of a really great teacher? We have some great teachers here, so I hope I don't flounder here. But this is what I think some of the attributes of a great teacher is. A great teacher can explain complex subjects, real complexity, things that are really difficult, in a simple, clear, and concise fashion. I think that is an attribute of a great teacher. You could take the most complex thing in the world and break it up so that even a simpleton can. I've got a friend like that. He's a great scientist. Right? And science and evolution, all these things can get so confusing and complicated. And he has this ability to just bring it down into layman's terms in such a simple, concise manner that you don't have to have any scientific background and you got it. That's a great teacher. That's one aspect. Another aspect. He could address a wide range of student levels simultaneously. Meaning, a great teacher, a real great teacher, could teach to a wide range of people with different knowledge and different backgrounds, and say the same words, which will hit each individual differently. Now, that's a very difficult thing to do. Right? Most people cannot do that. Right? Even most, what we would call great teachers, can't do it. This is an unbelief. A teacher that can say his words so carefully that he knows that Mr. X is going to take it on this level, but Mr. Y, who is going to see the depth on a different level, that takes something very special. The third thing, he communicate not only the details but a broader picture, system, or message. I remember many times you can get so involved in the nitty-gritty of something, you can forget what the larger subject is. So a great teacher can also always will put into context what's a detail and what's the broader picture. Always contextualize everything. Now, for this reason, I believe that what was the greatness of Rashi? More than the Rambam. The Rambam never wrote commentaries like Rashi wrote. More than the Rambam. In fact, the Rambam wrote in one place that he would have made certain commentaries if not for Rashi. He writes that. More than anyone, Rashi was the greatest teacher in Israel. Let's have a look over here. What were his works? He wrote a commentary on the Talmud. Now remember, the Talmud is cryptic. The Talmud is difficult to understand. There are certain words also. To really write a commentary of Talmud, what do you have to have? You have to have a tradition of some of the words, what some of the words mean. For example, there's some Greek words used in the Talmud. There's some words in the Talmud that are Greek in origin, even though it's really written in Aramaic. So who's going to tell you what that word means? Who's going to translate it? Rashi says so many times, Belaz, that means in the local vernacular, it was the old French, it means this. Sometimes it'll even say, Belashon Ashkenaz. Lashon Ashkenaz, Ashkenaz was Germany, was called Ashkenaz at that time. So he'll say, Belashon Ashkenaz, it means this. Rashi, on every page of the Talmud, and I'll show you in a moment, he explains it. But not only that, Rashi's commentary on the Talmud is so deep that a simple person could read it. You could teach it to a 15-year-old kid, he could read it, this is what Rashi says. And I could take that same 15-year-old kid at 25 when their mind is far more developed, and I could show them that Rashi in 4 words answered 30 questions on that piece of the Talmud. With 4 words. That's why I say he was concise and he could speak to a broad range of audience. That's why what made him the greatest known accepted teacher of Israel. He's accepted amongst the Hasidim, the Sfardim. Everyone claims Rashi for themselves. Hasidim, Sfardim, Ashkenazim, this one. Everyone accepts Rashi. He wrote a commentary on Tanakh. Now, first of all, his commentary on the Talmud, it's well known that the edition that we have of it now, the Talmud is a massive work. You have to realize the mind of the individual. If you go through one page of Talmud, and it takes hours to go through one page of Talmud for a really intelligent, above average intelligence person, takes hours. If you learn one page of Talmud for 7.5 years, you finish the Talmud. 1 page a day for 7.5 years. Rashi was on his 4th writing, his 4th revisions of his commentaries when he passed away. We don't have some of his original ones. His 4th revisions of his commentaries, which each one has this tremendous depth. He himself sometimes asks questions. Sometimes he doesn't ask it. He puts in a word, an innocent word. Or sometimes he'll just explain that this line in the Talmud is meant to be read as a question, which he'll say, bitmiyah, bitmiyah. So Rashi writes on the entire Talmud. Now, you know, for the last 1,000 years, everyone who studies Talmud, how did they discover it? When they study a Gemara, how do they learn it? You're lost without Rashi. Forget about it. Learning Talmud with Rashi is like it's like the alphabet. You can't survive without it. And that tradition of the true tradition that he got from his teachers, he absorbed every single drop. He was like that he absorbed, he carried down, and he taught to all generations. That is a greatness. So it's very interesting. The greatness, if I never viewed Rashi. What is Rashi? Who's Rashi? Rashi is the greatest teacher of Israel. That's what Rashi is. The greatest teacher of Israel. And he's great because he teaches concisely the entire tradition with tremendous depth on many levels. We teach kids 6 years old for Rashi. As adults, now he wrote his commentary on the Tanakh. What's the Tanakh? The Torah, the Chumash, the 5 books of Moses, the prophets, and the writings. The writings mean the book of Esther, we have Rashi, the book of Ruth, the Ecclesiastes, Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, everything we got Rashi. He opens up the whole thing. Now, Rashi's commentary on the Torah, to show you how deep it is, there are hundreds and hundreds of commentaries written on Rashi on the Torah. Quite recently, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he has a whole book just on explaining Rashi's words on the Torah. It's unbelievable. The Maharal, 16th century scholar, has a book called the Gur Aryeh, which is a book explaining Rashi from A to Z in depth and breadth. Now, there was something very unique about Rashi on the Torah. I want to just explain this point. There is a law in Shulchan Aruch, in the Code of Jewish Law, that says that every week one should actually review the Torah portion of that week, read the Hebrew twice, and then read what's called the Targum. The Targum is a kind of translation. One could do it by reading, let's say, a good English translation, like Aryeh Kaplan, one could fulfill it, or something like that. The Aryeh Kaplan Chumash, or something like that. You could fulfill the obligation. You read the verses twice. It's called Shnai Mikra, the verses twice. Many people do that. Their commentary, they learn Rashi. And there's an amazing thing that comes out of this. And this, I cannot prove it to you, but I can tell you it is true of myself, my experience, and it's true of people that I've spoken to. When you learn Chumash Rashi, if you go through the whole Bible, Chumash Rashi, you get a whole picture. You feel like the whole Torah is not just one little thing here and a little thing there. You see that the whole thing is one integrated unit. That's the greatness of it. The great teacher doesn't just give you the individual pieces. He's giving you the individual pieces, but he's making it fit into the whole. Chumash Rashi contains everything. And that's the brilliance of it. I'm going to show you something interesting about Chumash Rashi in a moment, and then I'm going to come back to this point. Now, he also wrote the responsa, and then there's something else I want to tell you about which is quite significant. In the year, Rashi passed away in the year 1105. He was 65 years old. Not such a long life, 65. I guess in those days that was probably considered